The content presented in this presentation reflects the personal interpretations, opinions, and research of the presenter. It does not necessarily represent the views, positions, or endorsement of any affiliated institution or organization. Any references to external sources or materials are included for illustrative purposes and do not imply endorsement or validation by the affiliated institutions. Attendees are encouraged to critically evaluate the information and consult primary sources for further clarification. Thank you. Hello friends, recently a new document NABL 112 is published. This new document is aligned with ISO 15189 2022, which deals with the specific requirement of medical laboratories. It is very important to understand what are the requirements which are mentioned in this document with respect to specific specialties. So here we are planning a full course which will include the details of this NABL 112 document and which will help all the laboratorians to implement the new standard and NABL requirement in the laboratory. As it can be seen that this time the document has been divided into two parts, NABL 112A and NABL 112B. So we will see the details and the complete document, the interpretations of the requirement which are given in these two documents. So you can see in this picture the content of NABL 112A documents, which includes, apart from the introduction, description and type of the laboratory, the scope, normative references, terms and definitions, general requirement, structural and governance requirement. That includes legal entity, laboratory director, laboratory activities, structure and authority, and risk management. Technical and management system requirement of all disciplines, which includes personnel, facility and environmental condition, equipment calibration and meteorological traceability, reagents and consumables, service agreement, externally provided products and services, pre-examination processes, examination processes, post-examination processes, control of data and information management, control of records and evaluations. The technical requirements specialty wise includes clinical biochemistry, clinical pathology, hematology and immunohematology, microbiology and infectious disease serology, histopathology, which includes fetal autopsy, transmission electron microscope, immunohistochemistry, digital pathology, cytopathology, flow cytometry, molecular diagnostics, which includes PCR based testing, molecular genetics, quantitative fluorescent PCR for prenatal testing, chromosomal microarray, next generation sequencing, histocompatibility and immunogenetics, cytogenetics, and lastly, point of care testing. The part B of NABL 112 document, which is guidance documents for medical laboratories, contains guidance for operating sample collection centers or facilities of the medical laboratory, guidance for scope preparations, guidance for lot verifications, guidance on algorithm for automated selections and reporting of the results, competency assessment forms, and examples of common biochemistry parameter with type of samples and their stability. So this we have seen about the content of part A and part B of NABL 112 documents. Now the next part is introduction. So what is given here? National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories is an accreditation body, provides accreditation service for conformity assessment bodies including medical testing laboratories. NABL is a signatory to Asia Pacific Accreditation Cooperation (APAC) and International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, that is ILAC, through Mutual Recognition Arrangement, that is MRA. These are based on mutual evaluation and acceptance of other MRA partners. Such international arrangements allow acceptance of test and calibration results between MRA partners countries. So basically this means that if you are performing a test or calibrations from any of the laboratory which is a part of MRA countries, the results will be acceptable in all of these countries. These two documents specifies the criteria for the medical testing laboratories for obtaining NABL accreditation. Medical testing laboratories shall fulfill the requirement of this document in addition to the requirements of ISO 15189-2022 medical laboratories requirement for quality and competence. Basically, if your laboratory is going for accreditation, it should fulfill the criteria of ISO 15189-2022 as well as NABL 112A and NABL 112B documents. The specific criteria document shall be used in conjunction with ISO 15189-2022. Wherever the standard is self-explanatory, this document has not addressed those clauses or subclauses. So all such type of clauses are not part of this document NABL 112. Further, the laboratory shall also follow national, regional, local laws and regulations as applicable. This may include some national or some state related guidelines including Clinical Establishment Act, guidelines related to the biomedical waste segregation and discards related to the NACO guidelines, and other regulatory guidelines related to the local municipal corporations or local laws. Now next you can see in this document it has mentioned about the description and type of laboratories. So what does it mentions? The requirements given in these documents are applicable to all medical laboratories applying for NABL accreditation regardless of the level at which they function. That may include micro, mini, small, medium, large or very large laboratories or the place in which they are located, may be located in village, town, district or city, or whether they are private, government, autonomous, attached to a hospital and standalone laboratory. So the requirements are applicable to all these categories which are included here irrespective of any other criteria. So for classification of laboratories on the basis of their size, the following classifications of laboratories shall be considered. NABL has classified the laboratories on the basis of their size into 6 categories, which includes micro category, where the laboratory receives samples of up to 25 patients per day. Mini laboratories, where laboratories are receiving patients up to 26 to 50 patients per day. Small size laboratories receiving patients 51 to 100 patients per day. Medium size laboratories receiving 101 to 400 patients per day. Large size laboratories receiving patients 401 to 1000 patients per day, and very large size laboratories are the laboratories which are receiving more than 1000 patients per day. So if you can see, the laboratories are classified on the basis of number of patients and not the number of samples or the number of tests which they are carrying per day. So the classification is strictly based on number of patients received by the laboratory. Coming to the next part is the scope. So scope is basically the various specialties under which you can apply for NABL accreditations. So here NABL has described the scope in 10 different specialties, which include clinical biochemistry, clinical pathology, hematology and immunohematology, microbiology and infectious disease serology, histopathology, cytopathology, flow cytometry, molecular diagnostics, histocompatibility and immunogenetics, and finally cytogenetics. So these are the various categories under which a laboratory can apply for NABL accreditation as per the specialty of the test they are performing. Under the scope, now you can see the NABL document has also mentioned front note. So what it includes? First, POCT, immunological, serological test and in situ hybridization tests such as FISH and CISH are common to more than one discipline. Therefore, this can be listed under respective discipline irrespective of the sections of the laboratory, the equipment where they are located. So if you are having some particular test which uses these techniques, they can be listed under particular specialty where those techniques are used, because these are basically the techniques that can be a part of various examination methods for detecting different measurements. So you can mention them in a respective discipline, and the equipment can be shared or the location can be shared by two or more different sections. Coming to the next note, it mentions that the test of nuclear medicine can be applied under the discipline of clinical biochemistry. So if there are any tests which are performed as a part of nuclear medicine, in vitro test, here we are talking about only in vitro test. So if there are any in vitro test of nuclear medicine, it can be applied under clinical biochemistry. The third note mentions that molecular diagnostics, which is a huge area, include tests of molecular genetics, molecular testing of infectious diseases, hematopoietic diseases, solid tumors, and prenatal genetic testing. Now, next note mentions that biochemical genetics test can be applied under molecular diagnostics or clinical biochemistry. Similarly, karyotyping to be applied under cytogenetics. At the end, it also mentions about the personnels who can review and authorize the release of reports in any of the discipline. So for this document states that on-site demonstration of competence along with records of relevant training experience in the relevant discipline shall be considered for recommendations of personnel who review the results and authorize the results of reports in any discipline. Further, this document also mentions that accreditation shall be considered only for those tests for which the laboratory itself is equipped and competent to carry out. So if the laboratory is not equipped with the necessary instrumentations and other resources and is not competent to carry out those tests, recognition or accreditation will not be provided to those laboratories. Also, it further mentions that the test for which quality cannot be ensured shall not be included in the scope. So, some tests which are newly developed or the tests which do not have appropriate quality control measures, or their quality if cannot be assured or ensured, those tests will not be included in the scope for accreditation. Further to this, the document also mentions that the laboratory shall have samples, both positive as well as negative, which should be available for the test witness, such as testing and retesting at the time of assessment, so that the laboratory will be able to demonstrate the competence in the applied discipline for the applied scope. So if you do not have samples during the assessment or at the time of assessment to witness or to demonstrate your competence of your laboratory via testing and retesting activities, those tests will not be included under the scope, or those tests will not be granted accreditations. This document also mentions that appropriate records to establish continuous ongoing work in the discipline shall be maintained. So if it is again observed that there were any gaps in the maintaining records of any discipline or any test process for a specific test, then again it will not be considered for the accreditation. As a part of scope which is mentioned in this document further mentions that the collection center or facility for primary sample collection at sites other than its main laboratory shall also comply with the requirements of ISO 15189-2022 relevant NABL documents. Here it is a NABL 111 document which mentions about the procedure for recognition of sample collection center or facility declared by medical laboratories. So if you have any collection centers which are part of your laboratory, those can be included under the scope of the laboratory, provided they satisfies the criteria of NABL 111 and ISO 15189-2022 requirement. Now the next part here mentions about the normative references. So here it mentions that ISO 15189-2022 medical laboratories requirements for quality competence is the reference documents or the normative reference for these documents. Next to this document mentions about some of the terms and definitions which we will be coming across. in these documents, and their meanings, their definitions have been discussed in this clause number 3. We will be seeing these terms and definitions as a different lecture or as a part which will be covered in a different videos. So we are not going to cover all those terms and definitions here. They will be considered or they will be taken in some different video.